I think it's mostly taught. There may be some instinct for it. I certainly think that anybody who's sailed and just is familiar with how floating objects react to wind and waves is going to have that boat feel. I had done a fair amount of sailing before the first time they stuck me in a coxswain seat, so it felt very natural and comfortable, and I mean I was addicted the moment I sat in it. But I actually took the boat through the starting docks at the end of the lake, which novice coxswains are not supposed to do. They're supposed to go around. Well, nobody told me that, so I just took it straight through, and they were like, "Oh, okay, no problem." So I think but it is mostly taught. It's something that, I mean, I've spent more than a third of a century studying to be a half-decent coxswain, and I'm getting there. So it definitely is taught. It's learned. It's stuff we learn from other coxswains. I'm shameless about stealing other coxswains' lines, for example.
We've obviously been coxswain for quite a while. We've had exposure to a lot of different levels of coaching, high school, other clubs and national team and all of that. What would you say is the best advice as a coxswain you ever got from a coach? And what would you say is the worst advice you ever got?
I would say the most important learning moment for me was when I got to college and realized that there wasn't one correct way to cox a cruise shell. Through most of my high school career, I was so wrapped up in the idea that there was some textbook way of coxing a cruise shell, and I wanted to be that best coxswain. And it was when I got to college and we had all different lineups, and because of lab schedules, it was like, okay, Langham, you're taking out the 315 boat, Colburn, you're taking out the 327 boat, and there may be 7 people aboard, and it's whoever manages to get off that particular subway train in time. And then I realized, oh wow, a coxswain should adapt his or herself to the boat, to the rowers, to the crew that they're coxing, to the situation. And it took me to my freshman year in college really to figure out that I didn't have to be as rigid. You know, there was no magic manual to follow. There were certain things that you did, but it wasn't that rigid.
What about the worst piece of advice?
Oh.
You can make it.
Worst piece of advice was don't worry. But that's, and the other thing that a lot of coxswains ask me, and coaches sometimes ask me for coxswains' sake, is what do I tell my coxswain as motivational calls, or how do I learn motivation calls? Can I listen to one of your tapes? No, because I don't have any. But what I tell coxswains is that's what winter training is for. Go to winter training, hear what the rowers are saying, because oftentimes the rowers are coxing each other on the ergs, or cheering each other on the ergs, or the bench pulls, or whatever it is. Learn what the engine room says to itself to motivate itself. Write those down in your notebook. Make that part of your race call repertoire. Learn from the rowers, because what they yell to motivate themselves, that's what will motivate them.
You mentioned tapes. Do you advocate taping? And if they do, how do you approach reviewing them? Just give it to the kids and let them review it? Or
yes, most of the time, yes. And most of them now do anyway. They tape themselves, I would say, almost obsessively. But I think it is very helpful and useful to them. And occasionally they'll come to me and ask me to listen to their tapes and review them and so forth. I'm leery about making too many suggestions because obviously I don't want to mess with their style and whatever they're comfortable saying from the coxswain seat. But I think it is good. I mean, if they're listening to themselves, they're probably also going to be listening to other coxswains and just listening generally, and that's a good thing.
Have you had to deal with any weight issues, eating disorders, and that kind of thing? And how do you address that, especially for the high school aged kids?
No, thank goodness, not yet. Partly, I think, because I deal with male coxswains. I very seldom deal with female coxswains. And with men, it's probably not as much of a self-image issue. It's just a number, whether it's 121, 125, whatever the number is. So it's not quite perhaps as loaded.
Like, I've seen it more as in they want to weigh less so the boat goes
Yes.
faster.
Well, what we do is we tell them, first of all, this is your weight. This is what we don't, first of all, we don't emphasize it a lot. We try to let it drop out of the picture a lot. But as you say, they put it on themselves. And by the way, I'm one of the worst of that. I was 118 for head of the Charles this year. But then I've been doing it long enough, I know how to do it. So we try to de-emphasize it first and foremost, and then we emphasize nutrition. We make sure that if they are cutting weight, they're doing it smart. Fortunately, for the last few years, we've had small coxswains, and it hasn't been an issue. The other thing is a lot of our coxswains tend to be wrestlers, so they already get the weight thing, and that's been very good because they're also very competitive. We find that's a very, if you're looking for a coxswain, go find the 120-pounder and give them something to do. But we're very leery about that, but what we do is we try to emphasize nutrition, the good side of it.
2 more minutes for questions if you'd like. Good chance to find out about those little people. Let me, if I can ask, in your mind, what's the relevance between size and speed?
Not much. I mean, I've heard all kinds of mathematical figures that pounds a foot or 0.2 of a second over 2K. I don't know how that was ever measured, if it ever was. I mean, obviously, at some point it matters, but a good coxswain is worth whatever their extra weight is our feeling, especially at the high school level when most races are not decided by tenths of a second. I mean, a good coxswain will get you whatever that distance will be. I mean, obviously, if somebody comes in and they weigh, just a huge amount, it's like, you're going to be rowing this spring. But we really try to decouple the weight from the performance. We're looking at how good a coxswain is at coxing.
We weigh our coxswains once in 4 years. They just come in, we weigh a natural weight, and then we give them to the training room, and we don't know the weights. We don't want to know. They work that out with the training room, and the training room keeps that information from us. We're dealing with the gals. Mike, what do you all do, or Gavin, or what do you do in terms of weighing your coxswains? Do you do that differently? Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't believe, I never asked the coxswains to lose weight, never. I think if it makes any difference, the only difference it makes is the first couple strokes, getting both started. I had a coxswain back in the 90s, I was freshman heavyweight coach in the Navy, and he was a little kid like this big, and all of a sudden he started growing, and he got to be 150 pounds, okay? The guys loved him. They went undefeated and they won sprints. So that was the last time I ever thought about coxswain weight.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would.
You look at him in the picture, he looks like one of the rowers.
Yep, I would.
So what do you want? You had 9 guys with you.
Have you ever had coxswains, it was his regiment, have you ever asked coxswains to gain weight?
No, I've never asked him to gain weight at all. I don't think that's a healthy thing to do.
No.
I don't touch him, I coach him, and I don't touch him. If they don't want to come and talk to me, they're losing some weight, I usually try to discourage them from doing it unless they really look like they might need some help,
Rob's around if you have any questions. Thank you.